Namaste and welcome to a very special episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. I'm Roshan Cariappa, and today we're going to be deep diving on the Karnataka elections. The polls are due on May 10th. So joining me today in this very special episode, we have Rohit Jayaraman, who is a resident political expert, and you've seen Rohit on multiple episodes before, slicing and dicing numbers, constituencies, talking about trends and whatnot. So welcome back, Rohit. Good to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Gary. Always good to be back.
Awesome. And joining us in conversation, we have Prasanna Vishwanathan, CEO of Swarajya magazine. Of course, Prasanna, you've seen as well on multiple weeklies. He's a friend of the podcast. So Prasanna as well is going to be adding to our perspective here. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Roshan, for hosting me. Privileged to be on the show and look forward to an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Nice to have Rohit as well.
Nice to be with you.
Awesome. So, I mean, what many of you guys don't realize is we've already been chatting for about an hour, I think. Right. So, this is going to be a continuation. And indeed, there's a lot to talk about. And I think Karnataka elections are, important, I think, in the sense that if you look at it from the party perspective, for BJP, it is the lone state in the south. For Congress, it is perhaps the one of the last remaining states where they are a stronghold, right? Or some sort of a stronghold. Right, and also these polls are happening right before the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and perhaps Madhya Pradesh coming up in November is the only exception otherwise, right? So it's important in many different ways. Karnataka itself is very important from an India perspective. So Rohit, let's begin with sort of a 101, right? How does Karnataka typically vote? What is the different calculus? What are the dynamics? So on and so forth.
So I think Karnataka is a very interesting state, right? In a lot of ways, in the sense that it's fairly unique in being one of those states which has less of a statewide political narrative, right? It's much more a confluence of regions and individual seats, especially in an assembly election, as opposed to a lot of your so-called narrative states. And there's not a north-south divide. In the sense, if you look at even Karnataka's neighboring states like Tamil Nadu or Andhra Pradesh, even Telangana, on one side, they're all, broadly states you would call narrative driven, right? Like Tamil Nadu is known for producing ridiculously one-sided verdicts where, even lampposts will win or titans can lose if they're on the wrong ticket on that particular election. Karnataka that way is much more and probably uniquely similar to its northern neighbor, right? Maharashtra. In the sense that it's still kind of politics where, people have elections on a seat-by-seat basis or a region-wide basis with individual strongmen having their own support bases, trying to do politics at a very local level. That's how Karnataka traditionally has been. So has, of course, Maharashtra. But interesting thing here is the two nuances to this, right? First is that in Karnataka, again, there are different regions. And these regions really vote differently. Like everyone, I'm sure if you've been following the Karnataka elections, you would have heard about the focus on Old Mysore region, which is basically, what people refer to as Old Mysore in this context, at least, is the southern districts of Karnataka, right? Both to the north and the south of the city of Bengaluru. On one side, like your districts like Mysore, Chamarajanagar, Mandya, Hassan, Tumkur, Kolar. The other, one of the other big regions is what people used to call Bombay, Karnataka, right? Basically parts of Karnataka that were once part of the Bombay presidency till the reorganization of states. Then you have your Hyderabad, Karnataka, what today it's called Kalyana, Karnataka, which is again the parts of Karnataka which were part of the Nizam's dominions. And you have your coast, and of course the city of Bangalore is so big that it's literally its own region, right? I mean, it has more than 10% of the seats in the state, and probably in another delimitation increase even more. But broadly, these regions definitely do vote differently, probably due to their separate demographics, and of course their historical memories are very different, right? Because some of these places really weren't ruled under the same polity for many, many years, many centuries actually before, linguistic reorganization. So that's something that's really the bedrock of Karnataka politics. The other nuance, of course, here we need to understand is elections have become more and more nationalized, right, over a period of time. The same thing applies at a statewide level. So today when we say that, 10 years back or 15 years back, Karnataka is a state which had a seat-by-seat election, or even last time that was probably the case, or maybe a region-wise trends were there. You can never fully rule out the fact that, state will start voting as a state, right? Like, that's probably where we are all heading to. Like, 2019, large part of the country voted as a country. Like, you could see the same trends everywhere, and there were a couple of outlying states which acted as a state, like Tamil Nadu or, for instance, Kerala to a lesser extent. Punjab was another exception which voted differently. Well, the rest of the country voted in one way. So these trends are increasingly amplifying only. So we cannot always rely on what is historical, and that's probably, and as we go deeper into this election today, into this analysis today, that's probably the root of how different strategies for this election are being played out.
I think just to add to one point that Rohit said, I think he gave the dynamics that plays out typically in the state election. One feature which has been constant in Karnataka from a national election perspective is that since probably 2004, there has been a quote unquote a national vote. If you kind of equate the national vote with the support for BJP, BJP has been actually a dominant player in all the elections since 2004, even when Vajpayee could not get a re-election. I mean, when BJP suffered setbacks, and even in its traditional strongholds like UP, and they couldn't win in Bihar. I think Karnataka was one state again which almost 16 MPs they won. Subsequently in 2009, again, I think when UPA could consolidate and come back to power, Karnataka was an outlier state nationally. Like, again, BJP, I think, even bettered it by winning 17 or possibly 18 there. Correct. And then, of course, 2014, they did like probably 20, I would, right? In
2017.
17, actually. And then 2019 was the watershed in terms of the national elections, where they almost won 26 out of 28. So what Rohit said accurately captures the dynamics in the state election, where typically because of the, the historic context, and also, Karnataka also has... I can't remember a last time where like there is a towering political personality like what we have in few of the other southern states, where they can become the polarizing figure, right? Actually, like say, or two titans and all. Karnataka maybe because of the fact that national parties continue to hold sway in many regions. National parties, by definition, they have a bit of I wouldn't call exactly internal democracy, but there is a competition, factions and all that, which kind of makes it, a little more impervious to some kind of trends that you see in Tamil Nadu, actually. Of course, I mean, there are exceptions. Yadurappa was like for long the towering figure in the state BJP, and to some extent you can say after Congress got Siddaramaiah in, to some extent, you could say that he has a certain stature in parts of the state, actually. Of course, not the kind of towering figure that Yadurappa is there for BJP, but he has his own constituency, kind of based on a certain social engineering. So this dynamics plays out in this state, like unlike Tamil Nadu, where, as he rightly put it, like it's just like all or zero, in that sense. So in Karnataka, there are two distinct trends. State elections happen in a certain way, and the national elections kind of unfold very differently. And I think the best example that I can think of is 2013, when BJP government was voted out of power. I think they kind of got reduced to 40. Definitely Yadurappa moving out of the party and starting his own outfit, plus what happened in even the Bellary, at least Sri Ramulu started his own party, which kind of, catered to a certain demographic in Kalyan, Karnataka. Even then, it was kind of reduced to 40. I think like JDS was or probably I think Jagdish Shettar still became the leader of opposition, but there was hardly any difference between JDS and BJP actually. So, but by 2014, in the national election, the fortunes had dramatically changed. This was like hardly 9 months or 10 months, the next election happened. Definitely BJP was reunited, and then there was this Modi factor as well, which played a big role. And similarly in 2018, BJP did well compared to 2013. They won like 108 assembly segments, or 106. 105, I would think. 104-5. But there was this JDS and Congress which came together and formed the government. But in the 2019 election, which was very unique, BJP actually took probably 170 assembly segments lead in the Lok Sabha election, which is like almost the verdict that probably happened in 80s, or maybe something like what Devraj once managed to win. I don't think so. Even Hegde could ever win with this kind, or maybe it was '89 election where Congress
Congress
won,
had a huge
Congress
majority.
had a huge victory. So I'm just saying that dynamics seem to be dramatically shifting between the national election. But as Rohit said, history is not always, history is useful for us to understand, but it's not certain that it will repeat every time. So this sub-regional variation of voting pattern within the assembly election, we have to look out whether that continues to repeat one. And similarly, whether the state holds votes the differently from state and national election. These are two interesting things. These are trends which have happened, but not certain whether this could continue to happen in the future. So this is broadly what I look at the dynamics.
So something that we can't discount, as with other states as well, is the whole caste and community influence that the vote share can have, right? I mean, and here again, there are very distinct patterns. Lingayats are firmly with the BJP, right? Of course, the current chief minister is a Lingayat himself, and also, I mean, Yediyurappa ji as well, earlier than that. And Vokaligas being firmly with the JDS and so on. And Kurubas, OBCs being with the Siddaramaiah and so on, right? So do you see that sort of holdings, holding to the same distinct trend itself, or is there like a little bit of a bleed in terms of, the caste votes moving to different parties and so on?
See, I think you look at it in terms of each caste, right? In sense of what exactly has happened over a period of time. So, Prasanna, of course, mentioned Devrajos, and that's quite interesting to understand in the context of Karnataka, right? Because, and that's where, Karnataka again, and the way I look at Indian states, Karnataka's closest, peer, I would say, in a lot of ways, or society that's closest to Karnataka is historically been Maharashtra. And Devraj also is actually where the two states diverge politically, right? In the sense that what he did in Karnataka was transform the Congress into a non-dominant caste party. And Maharashtra Congress, under the succession of Maratha strongmen, of course, Sharad Pawar being the latest, and then, of course, even someone like a Vilas Rao Deshmukh, remained a party of dominant caste. So this, and the other difference in Karnataka, of course, there are two dominant castes, right? There's Lingayats and Vokaligas, unlike Maharashtra, which is basically just Maratha. So this change in the attitude of the Congress, where it tried to make itself a non-dominant caste party, sort of has defined Karnataka politics, right? In the sense that what that has done is it sort of permanently put the Congress in a sort of a back foot in Karnataka in terms of numbers, because the dominant caste plus other associated groups, urban areas, groups that have traditionally not liked the Congress anywhere in India, right? Like, I mean, if you look at it, Bombay city, as it was then, was always anti-Congress. So was Delhi city for a very long time till Sheila Dikshit. So was Bangalore city, right? I mean, it's never really a Congress stronghold. Even Chennai, I think, always had a tendency to be more pro-DMK than the rest of Tamil Nadu in those days, like I'm talking about the 60s. So that's something that happened in Karnataka. Something similar happened in Gujarat also, with the whole CAM movement of, the Gujarat Congress, which of course put the Congress permanently out of power in Gujarat, because CAM, I think, happened in the 80s. 85 was the last time Congress won an election in Gujarat. So something similar they did in Karnataka. The one difference has been, unlike Gujarat also, which has only one dominant caste, that's the Patidars, and the BJP has been very effective in sort of fusing them as their core support base, give or take odd events like Hardik Patel. But here, there are two dominant castes, right? So that's helped the Congress, because the two dominant castes each try to go their own way and create split votes, right? Like Prasanna talked about the 1989 election. There was a split in the dominant caste vote inside the Janata Party itself, because Deve Gowda had again formed his own party, and there was a separate Janata Dal, which was broadly the Lingayat kind of a group. The BJP was also the joker in the pack even then, because it's historically had a natural affinity from dominant caste voters. Again, 99 Congress won, the same thing happened. There was a Janata Dal secular of Deve Gowda, which was cutting dominant caste votes against the BJP and the JDU. And also there was anti-incumbency, but this was one of the dominant features then. Then, that divide has always been there between BJP and JDS, because JDS represents the Vokaligas and the BJP sort of represents, or I would say JDS represents the Vokaligas of old Mysore, right? Because a lot of other Vokaligas, including in the city of Bengaluru, vote very firmly with the BJP. BJP still managed to grow under Yediyurappa. 2008, they almost pulled off a majority, even though the JDS hadn't died out. But then, of course, you had your whole thing of Yediyurappa's issues with the party, or rather, the party's issues with Yediyurappa, and him going away. The vote split again, 2013 Congress won. So that's how it's been with the two dominant castes, right? And there's a slight nuance here that the Vokalikas have never really been wholeheartedly with the Congress since the formation of Karnataka. Because the moment Karnataka was formed, the northern regions came in control of the state, Congress moved to Lingayats. And that sort of made the Vokalikas look for their own alternatives. For a long time, they were with the.
I think to some extent, the Karnataka linguistic imagination of Karnataka as a state is essentially a old Mysore conception in the sense, of course, some of the great literary figures come from central Karnataka, but the imagination is like centric around the old Mysore region. So I think like even for building that, attempts to build that Kannada identity, the old Mysore Okaligas have actually all sometimes even voluntarily taken a backseat politically to accommodate that thing. That I think kind of even reflects even before Devraj Ors, you see a lot of Lingayat.
Correct.
I think like except for a couple of
Actually, all the
CMs,
CMs, I think, from the formation
from
of
the
United States.
United States were all from the Lingayat community.
The
So
Lingayat
to
community.
that extent, till like say shrinking of the Janata movement into a very the Devagowda part of the Janata movement where it kind of started broadly getting identified with one caste. What he says is largely true of Vokaligas, where there is a political assertion like the way Lingayats have either firmly backed BJP. That has not been the case.
Yeah,
right?
because see, the Vokaligas were a bit more divided even in the older days, and there was always an anti-Congress strain among Vokaligas, which still persists even today. Actually, contrary to what a lot of people might say about DK Shivkumar, but he's really not very impactful in his community. But the moment the Lingayats moved away into first the Janata Dal and then the BJP after the whole Devraj Ors experiment, that's when Congress started being on a back foot, right? Because till the 80s, it was a one-party state. I mean, it was one of the last states to get a competitive political system. Andhra was another that had to wait till.
Slightly happened little later.
Yeah, we had to wait till NTR. This happened here, and Maharashtra was the last. It literally had to wait till the 90s to get a competitive political system. So that's how it would look at it from a caste perspective. Today, the Congress in Karnataka is very firmly the party of Dalits and Muslims, who together are around 25% of the state. The Kuruba community has historically also been a bit more pro-Congress, and that has completely solidified under Siddaramaiah after he moved to the Congress. But again, there's some regional variation. And if you ask me, it would be a bit premature to say that Kurubas are going to be with the Congress forever. Like, you can see clear shifts of Kuruba movement, especially Lok Sabha elections. Again, in North Karnataka more than South, because Siddaramaiah himself is from Mysore. So that obviously makes a difference. An interesting thing in Karnataka, where it is similar to all the other northern and western states, is the strong support of the smaller OBC communities, right, for the BJP. In the sense that the communities that are not politically assertive, that are just communities which are like 3%, 2% in number, and in Karnataka, unlike UP or even Rajasthan or something, these communities rarely get seats because at a seat level, as we discussed, you need power of your own to be able to convert seats, even if you have a party backing you. These communities are largely firmly with the BJP for a variety of reasons, and that's something that defines politics. The smaller OBC communities. Then you have a fairly big ST community in Karnataka, which historically was with the Congress, but under Sri Ramlu and a whole host of other powerful leaders, like in your Kalyan Karnataka region, whether it is Shivan Gowda Naik, you have Narasimha Naik in Yadgir. A whole host of them, they've sort of become fairly consistent supporters of the BJP, especially in Kalyan Karnataka. South Karnataka, they're still mostly with the Congress in part. They're in good numbers, but not in the same numbers they're there in Kalyan Karnataka. And parts of Belgavi and all, of course, the famous Jarki Holy brothers sort of control them, but they're not very this thing in number there. So I think that's broadly how it is. And if you ask me, I think, and this links to what Prasanna said about national elections, you'd say that a lot, except for Muslims and good section of Dalits, the rest of the communities by and large do prefer the BJP as a national party. So that's what probably explains its edge in national elections. This goes even for like Vokaligas, right? I mean, in Old Mysore, clearly they do prefer to vote for the BJP unless there's somebody from the Devagowda family themselves standing. Or even in that case, like you saw with Sumalata, managing to defeat Nikhil Kumaraswamy in the right circumstance. Of course, she had her own personal vote and the image and the sympathy
Ambrish.
factor due to the timing of Ambrish's death and the circumstance in which she was denied that ticket. But in general, that's how you'd look at it. But that's not how it works in assembly elections. Like a lot more this thing.
There's also the additional factor of the candidate.
Of the
charisma.
candidate, exactly.
So Bangalore would be a good example. If you really look at, say, take Bangalore region for instance, as you said, Bangalore being so big, almost 10%. I think in every assembly election, I think BJP's best performance in Bangalore urban was still now probably in 2008.
Correct.
When
Around
2008
18
is a significant election in Karnataka because there was a delimitation actually, so we could use that. So they won like 16,
Or
I
80,
guess.
I think
Actually.
even 18 seats.
16 or 17.
Yeah.
And other than that, if you really look at the Bangalore urban constituencies, at least half of them, it's almost like pre-decided in terms of Congress and BJP when it comes to assembly election. But let's say a seat like BTM or let's say a seat like Vijaynagar or a seat like say even Yashwantpur. I mean, these are traditionally very weak for BJP in assembly polls actually. Even KR Puram, for instance, though they won it once, I think the first time when it was
2008.
But if you really look at the margins for the national election, I mean, like say a deficit of 30 gets converted to like even leads up till 40,000 in the national election, okay? So that caste calculus, right, kind of really reconfigures itself during the
Or
Lok Sabha,
Mel
Survey during the Lok Sabha election. But I think it comes to play very strongly in the assembly election. And adding on to what he says, I think like the Devrajor's strategy, the basically trying, I mean, which basically I think the ideological successor for that in some ways is our Siddaramaiah with his Ahinda framework. I think Urs kind of was a disruptor in terms of the reconfiguring Karnataka social sense actually, though a lot of ill effects happened out of it. So my sense is that, as he said, right, I think in the last two elections, Congress has realized that like because the two politically dominant communities are not its strongest backers actually, like where the two strong dominant communities are definitely anti-Congress and aligned either broadly to BJP or broadly to JDS, like he said in the OMR region. They have kind of looking at multiple strategies to chip at the core of the dominant social groups. Like for example, from 2013 to 2018, I think like one of the reasons why governance suffered in Karnataka and Siddaramaiah became so unpopular was that relentless focus. I mean, of course, all the Tipu glorification and all the typical things that Congress does apart. I think like he was so hell-bent on, one, establishing that these two dominant groups are not as dominant as what people think. So he did a caste census, which is a very Bihar idea. Definitely, I wouldn't say that Karnataka is like beyond caste consciousness, but Karnataka is much beyond that, right? Like, but that obsession with that caste census, which unfortunately I think is again becoming a big theme. So first thing they started, and it was actually done by the backward classes department, which by definition would have an interest in not maybe undercounting the number of the dominant communities, okay? And of course, he didn't get the courage to publish it because of the backlash. Then the next step that he tried was basically the separate religion card actually. Play the devil's advocate to put, of course, there are some impulses within the Lingayata community also, which kind of wants to look at it as a separate religion. See, in any large community, especially with I found out there are 5 dominant mutts in the Lingayat Panchamadas, but there are like totally 3,000 mutts actually, which kind of, of course, they do tremendous job in taking care of social service and all that. And Yediyurappa empowered a lot of them by first time, where state actually funded them very liberally to do their activities and all. And so there are definitely divisions within that actually. So last time they played a different strategy where they kind of played on Lingayat as a separate religion. That was the strategy. And it backfired. Probably BJP was also at its strongest nationally and all that stuff, so it could work well for them. So having realized that mistake, because at that sense it almost become like anti-Hindu in the popular narrative what they were trying. Of course, I think there's an element of honesty also in that criticism that it was anti-Hindu. But this time, I think like they kind of pivoted. I would say maybe Rohit knows, but I'm just like watching from what they're doing. Is they pivoted to a much more cleverer strategy to look at chipping away the Lingayat vote bank by fomenting the subcaste fault lines actually. So Lingayat again, it's not a monolithic community. So like basically there was a huge agitation, especially among the Panchamasali Lingayats who are, I think, fairly substantial, numerically dominant, but the leadership or the CM, like say Yadurappa ji, later Shettar, or even Baswaraj Bommai, they don't hail from the Panchamasali community. Though I don't think so. Like no other political party in Karnataka would be able to empower or politically give the kind of power that Lingayats got in, like almost 16 cabinet berths and almost all the crucial portfolios. But again, like you can always keep chipping in and building a resentment against a particular. See, the entire social engineering strategy is to kind of always foment fault lines at some level. So I think like that Panchmasali agitation kind of gained a good thing, but BJP kind of, according to me, handled it little deftly by bringing in the 4% additional reservation by abolishing the reservation for Muslims and moving them to EWS. So Congress realizes there is a structural limitation in two dominant groups completely being aligned to one of their opponents actually. So they've been like quite pretty relentless. And even now, if you really look at last point that I want to make on the thing is that even in this election, if you really look at, they basically picked up the discards from BJP, from the Lingayat community. But the kind of narrative around it, right, actually has been like BJP is trying to discard Lingayat leadership and all that stuff. So Shettar quit only after not getting a ticket. Same was the case with Lakshman Savadi as well. Like, right? I mean, it's not that like they thought that BJP is on the decline and they switched sides. They waited till the ticket allocation day and then only so basically discarded. They joined, right? So somehow Congress, I think, does realize this, and we have to look at how it is going to play out, because I think in 2018 it was much more easier for BJP to handle it, because it was their attempt was last time to play it as a separate religion. So BJP could easily, that's a sweet spot for BJP if you call it, right? Like BJP gets into a weak wicket when you kind of get into like say one dominant caste joins with Muslims, or you kind of it is at its weakest generally when you have a very complex social engineering unleashed actually, right? So I think this time you have to concede that they have been little more clever than 2018 and trying to focus more on the subcaste angle, playing up all the reservation. And my only thing is that whatever the BJP, that solution that they came, it was quite a hit back at the Congress. I think like that's the best that they could have done. They did it like little at the fag end for it to have that type of resonance. But I mean, it's very easy for us to say there are so many legal complications that were there, which finally there was a High Court order in January which paved a way for BJP to pass this ordinance. So till that time they could not have done it actually. So we have to watch out for how this dynamics play out. Maybe Rohit could have some additional perspective on this. It's clever evil, but I don't know. I mean, all parties do it, so we got to be honest about it.
So we've spoken a bit about, we've spoken a lot about, how Karnataka typically votes, what are the caste and community influences and so on, right? Let's come to some of the issues of the this election, right? Now there are various whispers, agitations about, let's say, perceived corruption, lack of infrastructure development, and then there's this whole anti-incumbency thing that, props up every time, right? So I want to understand from you folks, what are the present issues of the day? What are the things that will drive voters to cast their vote one way or another? So maybe Rohit can start and, Prasanna can add.
I think building on from what Prasanna said about this whole Congress attempt to foment, agitation among different subcastes in the Lingayat community. See, that's one part of it. What they also did was they tried to create an agitation among STs for increased reservation, which again the BJP gave in, because STs at the end of the day are in Karnataka, a pro-BJP voting bloc. So like it made sense for the BJP to give in a demand that sort of helps their voting bloc, right? But I think apart from the social, this thing, what Congress also done in this election, and which I think has bigger salience today, is the freebie model, right? In the sense, Congress has announced various guarantees like 200 units of free power, 2,000 rupees to every woman. Then there's an unemployment allowance. Then they're
Actually,
also
that was
giving
quite interesting that 2,000 rupees if you're a graduate, the unemployment, and some 1,500 if you're a diploma holder. So, I don't know, it's quite.
So I think the Congress has really focused on hitting at the BJP's like what you could see in 2019 using Mr. Praveen Patil's term of the United Spectrum of Hindu Votes. Congress realized that, and the dominant caste thing in Karnataka, what we just discussed, they had to chip at it in multiple ways, right? What they've done, they tried it socially. I don't think that's a big success because, as Prasanna also mentioned, BJP sort of handled it very well and put it back to the Congress by sort of increasing the quota by taking away Muslim reservation, which put the Congress in a very uncomfortable spot. But what they've also done, I think this has probably been more successful, is hit it at the class lines, right? In the sense of creating a massive freebie setup, which Siddharama had already done in his government of 2013 to 18. But this is at a much higher stage and probably fits in with nationally what the Congress is trying to do. And that is something where the BJP, at least, it's a refuse to play ball, right? Like if you look at the whole statements by the PM against freebie culture, and of course BJP has its own set of welfare schemes, and it's difficult to identify what's a welfare scheme and what's a freebie. But I think at least in Karnataka there's a very clear distinction in the amount of freebies that have been given by the two parties, and that's something that I think is going to be a big issue, right? Like Congress cost, I think I was discussing with somebody yesterday, it's whatever they've promised comes to around 70,000 crores a year, which is out of a state budget of I think 2.3 lakh crores, which is around 25%.
25%.
And again, I think 87% of the state budget's already fixed for your salaries and all of that. So your 13% is the entire welfare budget. So they've literally doubled that. So I think it's a bit of this thing, right? There, you're looking at a situation where there'll literally be no money left for anything else like infrastructure or whatever else. But that's clearly a choice the Congress has taken because they feel that they need that to chip away at the BJP's inbuilt strengths, right? I mean, there's a caste calculus which we explained which favors the BJP in this state because not only does the largest dominant caste, that's the Lingayats, wholeheartedly back the BJP, but a whole host of other communities do. And then you have the entire communal angle in coastal Karnataka. Then you have an urban vote in Bengaluru. So this makes it very structurally difficult for the Congress, and they have to come up with innovative solutions, right? This is fairly innovative in the sense, I mean, you can say scorched earth policy, but that's what it is, right? It's a scorched earth policy. You have to win. You do what you can to win, and you figure it out later. So that's, I think, a big issue in this election, right? Then there's, of course, what they've also done is probably to try and offset any criticism on grounds of development by saying everything is freebie. What they've also done is try to paint the BJP government as absolutely corrupt and incompetent, right? So you have your whole 40% Sarkara, pay CM. Now all of these things, I don't know if by themselves they've picked up impact on the ground, but what they do is they at least make it very difficult at some level for
a
the
certain narrative of gloom and doom.
It adds to a narrative of gloom and doom, and it makes it difficult to counter the Congress's freebies on by saying that you're literally bankrupting the state by saying, oh, but that's what you're doing anyway by your corruption. Obviously, it's evidence-free allegations or whatever, but that's what the issues are. I would say, I would say the election is basically a contest between the structural advantages the BJP has in Karnataka. And here I disagree a bit with Prasanna when he said 2018 the BJP was the peak of its national popularity. Honestly, if you ask me today, the BJP is much stronger and more popular nationally than it was in 2018. Like the Prime Minister is way more popular than he was, if you ask me, 5 years. The party as a whole, especially in Karnataka, is much more well organized because there you still had the after effects of the whole BJP, KJP. So that integration hadn't fully happened. There were other issues. This time, all of that is over. The BJP also imported a whole lot of Congress strongmen during this whole government formation process. So the BJP, I would say, is today a much stronger party than it was in 2018. So that way, structurally, it helps the BJP. But the kind of narrative the Congress has woven or the kind of issues the Congress has risen, I don't think the BJP is in a position to respond to it, right? Like, I think culturally today, clearly the Prime Minister doesn't want to get into a freebie war beyond a point. He has some Lakshman Rekha. Obviously, it's not clear what it is to an outsider, but there is a Lakshman Rekha which he will not cross, and clearly the Congress has crossed it by at least 2 to 3 times. So that's where I think the election is really.
I think a great set of points. Actually, like of course, too much focus on social groups, and I think elections are certainly much beyond that. So Rohit has brought in some very good point. See, the BJP government, right, both under Yadurappa and later under Bommai. Bommai was actually a positive surprise for me. They've been like really fiscally very responsible. If you really look at the capital expenditure push that Karnataka has got, like, I mean, you would really see so many projects, especially in Bangalore, getting at least energized, like execution challenges will remain, which is a function of, the local governance capacity and all that. They actually put a lot of money on capex. If you look at the state budget and the kind of GSDP growth that Karnataka had in the last 2 years was pretty solid, actually. If you really look at, I don't know whether it might be probably a disadvantage also for the BJP is that they didn't really chest thump about it or try to create a model around it. Their COVID management was pretty good. In fact, I think among all the big metros, even if you look at something on vaccine coverage, I think Bangalore was like way ahead even in terms of coverage, and I think BBMP's last mile was very good actually. In Karnataka, I don't think so, except for that one really tragic incident that happened in Mysore in terms of oxygen non-availability, which led to few deaths. I think you wouldn't really hear anything like the kind of stories that came out from rest of India. I don't historically remember Karnataka elections being determined by freebies and all that stuff. But given the scale, and I mean, I would say like staggeringly irresponsible promises, actually, I think 85,000 crores is by one conservative estimate. Of course, they can't do it. They will, once you win the power, you always have the luxury of redefining that it's not going to be given to all women. It will be given to women who have not covered under XYZ, which will then come down to like 1 lakh women across the state, from saying that I'm going to give 2,000 to all women, you can filter it down to 1 lakh. I mean, they are going to do all that. But of course, there's no stopping making all these promises. BJP government not identified with a single signature welfare scheme, actually, which I don't know would Karnataka may, I mean, unlike say Tamil Nadu, where beyond all this the welfareist narrative is quite overwhelming actually, but in Karnataka, one, the sub-regional variation and lack of that all-encompassing, that messiah kind of a figure in the state who dispenses all that kind of politics is not there in Karnataka as yet. Mixer grinder, everything. Amma gives everything from cradle to grave. That kind of politics, which I think is one of the reason why in the last 10-15 years Karnataka's people don't understand that all these linkages that I think like since Karnataka didn't indulge in all these kind of irresponsible freebies and populism is why it reflects in the kind of growth that the state registered actually. So the lack of signature welfare, and also the challenge this time is that COVID happened. Definitely there was disruption for a lot of livelihood and all that stuff. So in that situation when there is a natural unhappiness among people, I mean, life was disrupted and upended completely because of the COVID and all that, right? So that lack of signature welfare, even Yadurappa, if you remember, he was identified with that bicycle for schoolgirls kind of a scheme and all that. But you can't think of a single, there was massive infrastructure push in Bangalore. They did like so many right things, toy clusters and industrialization in North, the mega textile park and all that. So it was a very typical, I would say like slide of more right-wing economics rather than a welfarist model. And I think Congress kind of realized that. Corruption, I think BJP may be driven by internal dissension and all the problems that they have internally. They were not able to coherently counter this 40% jib, and it was a well done, well executed media supported campaign. See, I don't know, like instinctively, if you go and talk to any random the entire contractor ecosystem in Bangalore is.
But it's not just the corruption allegation, right? I think there was also that paired with the fact that administration is not working, right? Or that there's a lot of stagnancy.
See, I don't know. Bangalore administration was not working in the sense that, like the problem is, I mean, I'll just narrate a personal example which I like actually. Like, I think there was this big floods that happened last year, and I think it was an unprecedented rainfall in Karnataka's history. So there was this stretch of outside that eco space in Bangalore where there was a sewage work happening, there was a metro work happening. So that entire stretch of 800 meters got flooded. And actually speaking, I've lived in Bangalore for 23 years. Generally, whenever it rains, so many parts of Bangalore always get flooded, even in rains which are not like that heavy. But this got so much highlighted because that is an area where you have all the techies and the migrant population living, and TV likes that kind of crowd, because primarily the TV watching, Times Now, Republic watching, or say that demographics typically lives there. And I mean, aspirations are higher also. So Bangalore infrastructure unfortunately is very weakest at the place where the highest tax paying population and the aspirant tax paying population lives. But if you really look at Bangalore, you go to central Bangalore or the part of Bangalore that we stay, Jayanagar, JP Nagar, Rajaji Nagar, Malleshwaram, I think like it's as good as any city with population that doubled in 10 years can provide that kind of an infrastructure. Let's be honest about it. The challenge is that the imagination of our urban administration in Bangalore is, their idea of Bangalore starts probably at Malleshwaram and ends at Kormangla, but basically the aspirant crowd, the aspirational crowd or the migrant crowd, the entire new settlements of Bangalore are all mostly in the eastern and the northern parts, right? Where they were all panchayats 15 years back, actually. I mean, like the part of Bangalore that I live got its first road in 2006 under Gram Sadak Yojana. I mean, I keep telling that actually. So the state incapacity to manage the urbanization was just there, and I'm sure even if you in anger vote out this government and get any other new government, I don't think so these kind of issues can be fixed. But I think they were completely internally distracted. The funny part is that I don't know, like, if it is something like that Lokayukta raiding that BJP MLA and recovering the money, definitely that kind of embarrassment is understandable and party would have to introspect. But I don't know how they could lose a narrative on a contractor. Of all people, we know how the contract ecosystem works in all states, right? Like contractors acquisition being taken very seriously and a campaign built around it, I think like BJP somewhere has definitely failed in its communication game, according to me. And let's be honest that like the real estate business is completely dominated by Congress politicians. You take like a possible CM aspirant is probably one of the biggest reality players in Bangalore. The previous home minister, I think he owns some of the biggest reality brands in Bangalore. So, like these kind of acquisitions, I think it's just shows that BJP was simply incompetent to counter it. And Congress probably did a good campaign to brush it. I mean, I wish that definitely more serious corruption allegations could have been flagged, but I think they kind of lost that particular narrative on it and added to that the life, right? Like already so much infrastructure work is happening, so people's movement get disrupted. All these adds on to that angst, and it's very easy to drive that narrative. So I don't know like how it will ultimately define voting, but definitely they have managed to build that. And lack of signature welfare scheme identified with the government might also be a particular issue. This freebie is like a very, it's like a race to the bottom. I'll tell you why. Like say when people want to vote out DMK and vote in ADMK, or when they want vote out ADMK and bring in DMK, it's like basically I have got all the welfare doles from the previous government. Let me vote the new government to get it. I think like unless there are other factors that are helping him, so that welfare is like if both the parties join the race, it's it will be a slippery slope actually. There have to be other things along with the welfare to convince the people, I would think.
Right. So let's talk about a couple of other factors, right? Unique things about this election. One is the fact that Karnataka is notorious for defections, right? Almost half the ministers have been in more than one party, right? I mean, you talked about Jagdish Shettar and Lakshman Saudi as well, recently jumping ship. And The other thing is that there is no declared CM face as such, right? Perhaps when you mentioned that recently they've BJP has come up and declared Mr. Bommai as the chief minister candidate, but again very late into the election, right? Why is that the case? I mean, if you could talk about both these things.
No, I think, see, defections are, at the end of the day, entirely a feature of hung verdicts, right? Or close elections. Like what happened in Karnataka last time was 104 seats for the BJP. Congress had 80, and I think JDS had around 37, and there were 2 to 3 others. So the majority mark in Karnataka Assembly is 113. So the BJP sort of needed 9 MLAs. Obviously, the JDS went with the Congress because the Congress said that they would have a JDS chief minister, which the BJP was clear it would not give because it couldn't have a situation where Mr. Yadurappa was not the CM if BJP was in power. So, see, the moment you have such a government, then two different factions. And what also happened in the Congress was there was intense factionalism at that time between Siddaramaya's people and people who are not, I would say, identified with Siddaramaya. I wouldn't call it, the faction of DK Shivkumar, anybody else. They were just not people at that point of time who were not associated with Siddaramaya. And what had actually happened was the bulk of the government actually went to the hands of these people who were not associated with Siddaramaya. So a lot of those people who were with him just thought we'll move on. And of course, you had the whole drama of Ramesh Jarkiholi and DK Shivkumar fighting over a cooperative bank election in Belgaum, which made because if you look at the results, and this whole Ramesh Jarkiholi saga continues even today with Lakshman Saudi and whatever was happening. But Ramesh Jarkiholi basically delivered 2 seats to the Congress, which normally were BJP seats. In the context of 104, 113, that's a lot, right? Like, actually, I think you could say he even delivered Lakshmi Hebalkar's seat. That was also backed by Jarkiholi in the last election. And then when this different realignment happened, he was really pissed off, and he sort of brought the government down. See, there was no defection when Congress got a majority, which was in 2013, right? Correct. So this whole thing essentially comes from the fact that the anti-Congress vote here is still divided between BJP and JDS. At the same time, the Congress itself is not in a position to get a majority unless there's a split today in the BJP, unless, of course, there's something new that happens in this election. But so the state's politics is inherently fragmented. So, see, people don't defect because they like defecting or for the fun of it. People defect, or there is an opportunity to engineer a defection when there is fragmentation. So I wouldn't say it's a phenomena. Like, anybody would defect if, like, people can defect in many places if there's a requirement or a option to do so. The situation gives them an opportunity.
Even that en masse defection 18, what people don't realize, it happened after the Lok Sabha election.
Correct,
where
they were
really was really badly
defeated. So that was where it sort of
triggered, right? Actually.
Came from, and there were too many internal contradictions in that government. In terms of the CM phase, I think Mr. Bommai, I don't know. I think I heard vaguely that he was declared the CM phase yesterday by both Nadda ji and Mr. Amit Shah, but I'm not sure of that. See, what's happened in the Congress at least is there's clearly a distinction between both DK Shivkumar and Siddaramaya, and a lot of people pushing Kharge also. And see, it doesn't. This is one of the weird truisms that have come in Indian politics with very little empirical basis that having a CM phase automatically elevates your campaign. It doesn't, especially when you're in opposition, right? Because you can have a much more focused campaign if everybody is working. Karnataka, I mean, DK Shivkumar is not a mass leader. Siddaramaya is a mass leader, but he's a mass leader of people who are not enough to constitute a majority. So, and he's a deeply polarizing figure. So, it has its own issues. Kharge is not really a mass leader in Karnataka beyond his own community. So, making any of them the CM phase would actually probably hurt the Congress. The same way, I mean, Bommai was not really a mass leader till... He's not really a mass leader, and the only reason if he's declared a CM phase is that he's the CM. So, like, by default, he's the CM phase. Because mass leader in Karnataka today, in some ways, if you leave aside Yadurappa, who's no longer in active electoral politics, or even Deve Gowda, is Kumaraswamy, who is the CM candidate. So, there is no CM candidate probably because there's nobody who can give the delta that justifies the kind of negatives that come with declaring a CM candidate, like lack of interest of other aspirants, right? Like today, if you make DK Shivakumar the CM candidate officially, Siddaramaiah may not be interested, and vice versa. So now everyone has a bone, right? Like everyone's running after a bone, and that's what this is. And that's not limited to the Congress. Like that's what the BJP did in 2017 in UP. What the BJP generally did in a lot of states where it recently gained power. Even in states where it is in power, it doesn't sometimes declare a CM candidate formally. Uttarakhand, Goa, yeah. Tripura, there was a lot of confusion on who might be the CM. Assam, they changed the CM. So, you declare a CM candidate where the positives outweigh the negatives, and I think all parties in this election, they've sort of gotten it right, if you ask me. I don't think there's some secret CM candidate, if you declared that, would have
I think
changed the election.
once Yadurappa kind of opted out of before that moved out, I think it made no sense for BJP to particularly declare any CM candidate unless they wanted to kind of do something very dramatically different and all. But I don't think so in a state like Karnataka. That
Correct.
kind of
room is there.
That kind of room is there actually. So I think everybody is playing a safety first kind of a strategy. I think it makes perfect political and electoral sense. Following the path of least resistance. And
so we've spoken about the fact that this is a very important election for the Congress, right? Perhaps one of the last remaining states for them, and with MP coming up as well. It could have a more of a psychological impetus for them in that sense, right? And here too they have sort of tried to foist Rahul Gandhi as well, right? Interestingly, in fact, I was just looking up that his remark on Modi chor hai and stuff, right? It was interestingly made in Kolar, right, for which he lost his seat as well. What is the strategy of Congress in terms of foisting Rahul Gandhi in Karnataka?
It's probably one of the very few states actually, maybe Kerala to some extent, Himachal and all, where Congress is organizationally, it has an infrastructure in almost all the 224 constituencies. Actually, even if you look at like you said, right, it was almost a one-party dominant state till 1983. So you have such a head start. Even Congress's closest competitor in Karnataka, BJP, is largely a 190 party. They were 180 and now probably they've got a lot of political entrepreneurs who have defected to it. So they have moved to 190, but BJP doesn't really have an infrastructure. It's not a pan Karnataka party in the strictest sense of the term like Congress is. So Congress obviously has this organizational infrastructure, and there are, like you said, Muslims and Dalits, at least the right. Though I'm not sure, maybe the Dalit factor is something that we can probably touch about. So they have a very strong presence, right? And obviously, Rahul Gandhi, they kind of want to benefit and boost his image from the infrastructure that the Congress party has. And I think from their internal assessment, I feel that they think this is a very prospective state. So obviously, Rahul's own image, say the basked glory kind of a thing is what they would want to do. I don't know whether his campaign is making any significant difference. I think that Congress is kind of running a very localized and constituency-specific, candidate-based kind of a campaign broadly. Maybe it provides, the speech about Basavanna Ji. I've read all works of Vachanas of Basavanna Ji, and there was no reference to handing over business to Adani. Seriously. That's I think the Lingayat scholars have not resolved what Basavanna has, the corpus of work of Basavanna, because there are a lot of disputed claims about how much was originally written by him and how much was written by his followers. But Rahul has read all his work, so I don't know whatever that means. And
I thought one could not top, Mr. Karge's remark on licking a snake and finding out if it's poisonous. But trust Rahul Baba to.
No, this was okay. I think and then I think there was this speech, I think possibly made in coastal Karnataka, where I think lost in translation, where I think he was attempting to say that fishermen make a lot of effort to catch metaphor, and I think maybe That I think I would blame on the enthusiastic translator than Rahul himself actually. So I don't think so. It's going to make a difference one way or other. And if there is a favorable verdict, obviously, retrospectively, they will fit it into the narrative. I mean, that's okay. I think that's par for the. I think even Priyanka Gandhi is campaigning like that dosa thing and all, where she came to some place in Mysore and all, and she invoked that. If you know, like in 1978, presumably, I mean, she had lost her constituency, and her comeback was from Chikmagalur. Maybe now it's a part of the region from where you come from. It's actually Chikmagalur includes Udupi. Chikmagalur includes the Coorg seeds. I think it doesn't. Mysore. It comes under Mysore. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, of course, the legend is that like how she traveled in an elephant and campaigned and all that, but since he had briefly touched upon Devraj Horse, you had that very notorious Indra Brigade, which was formed by him. By Devraj Horse's follower, he got in a whole lot of, what is the pleasant way of putting it? I mean, I don't want to use the Kannada slang for it. Lumpen elements, I think. Yeah, better we'll use a communist term for it. Including his own son-in-law, MD Nataraj, who was the founder of that Indra Brigade. And I think they just wreaked havoc there in that Lok Sabha election. Of course, there was no social media and all those days, so it was just documented by some Kannada journalist and all that. And she won the election. So I think like Priyanka was like, who kind of models herself on Indra's, attire and mannerisms and all. I think she kind of invoked that and all. But I think these are all in the margins. I really don't think so. Maybe I'm not sure. Like, is there like still resonance for say the Indra factor in Kalyan, Karnataka at least actually?
See, I think the Gandhi family name still carries some weight among the core constituencies of Muslims and Dalits. Yeah. Anyway, the Congress is core constituency, so that way, they have a value, but they definitely are net negative, I would say, in going beyond that. Like how I would look at the Gandhi family today in Indian politics, not just in Karnataka, is they ensure the Congress has a floor. But they also ensure it has a high floor and a low ceiling. So it's sort of like it's there.
No, my only interest in terms of the party high command would be who, in case of say if Congress either on its own or in JDS, more likely if there is a fractured mandate, who would the high command make the CM? Because I think like one sense, I think like last time it was pretty clear that they will make Siddaramaiah the CM. This time, like I said, no, since they have not declared any CM candidate. Last time, I think around 2013, DK Shivakumar's image was like, I think he was just coming out of a very ugly quarrel with the Gaudas, and he was constantly in fight with them, and his own reputation was in tatters to the extent that Siddaramaiah didn't even include him in the cabinet actually. I mean, he joined much later, right, as the energy minister. So he was kept away from the power equation also. And then, of course, he went to Tihar and then recovered some political capital and all. But I think like this time, what I have heard is that like at least 30-35 people, he's bit like the Bellary brothers model they did in 2018, where they kind of funded at least 20 to 25 BJP candidates in Kalyan, Karnataka, up till even few in central Karnataka also, and few even in Uttar Kannada. So I think like some model like that, where I think 30-35 people, maybe if he's funded them, and like say Congress goes for a internal voting to elect the CM. So I think like what would be Rahul Gandhi's strategy? Like for example in Punjab, I think it kind of backfired. Like they went in for Chani and they created such a spectacle around it, but then they suffered their worst electoral defeat actually. So similarly, I think pragmatically though in Rajasthan, I think they seem to have backed the old Warhouse Gehlot. So, like, to some extent, I think some of his picks and strategizing, or whoever is advising strategizing, have been fairly okay. So, one thing that will be interesting is like, what will be the kind of leadership that they are looking at in Karnataka. Otherwise, I think like even Modi factor will be like, honestly, according to me, would be not as resonating as what it is during the national election, which basically defines that 10% vote share difference between a state election and a national election is like quite unprecedented, which is that Modi factor. But I think increasingly, and Karnataka more so, like Rohit said, extremely strong local candidates and seat by seat variation. I think like whatever amount of campaigning by the national leadership can give them like some marginal push towards the end, but I think it will be more local than national. That's my overall sense.
So I was actually going to ask you about that, right? The fact that Prime Minister Modi is an X factor in a lot of these elections that play out, right? And he, of course, recognizes the fact that this is an important elections. He's made multiple visits here, along with Nadaji and the others. Has Yogi ji also come?
Yeah,
He's also right.
I think he's here today.
Yeah. So, how much of an influence do you think Prime Minister Modi will have on these elections? Because clearly he's a very popular leader in Karnataka.
See, I think the Prime Minister's influence is twofold, right? One is, of course, there are a lot of people who vote for the BJP because it's Modi's party, right? So, leaving that aside, his visits, I think what it will do in the current context at least is because there's a general perception that, Congress is ahead, whether you see it from the polls, some of the polls, or some of the other narratives that have taken place. What it just does is it sort of creates an impression the BJP is in the game, right, or even ahead. That's something the BJP has tried very consistently with the sheer number of leaders who are visiting the state, right? Like there are rallies everywhere of lots of people. And while the Congress, I mean, like it has a few odd rallies by Rahul or Priyanka and Siddaramaiah. DK Shivkumar actually, I don't think is even actively campaigning. Like he's mostly in Bangalore. He's mostly in Bangalore and getting people and all of that. Basically, more of an organizational sort of structure he's doing. BJP is doing what you can call carpet bombing, right? And it's all sorts of people like Smriti Irani, Yogi, Devendra Fadnavis. And I'm talking of people who would not be. Himanta is also coming, I've heard. So Shivraj Singh Chauhan has made a lot of visits. Rajnath Singh. So all sorts, General VK Singh. So all sorts of ministers. Nirmala Sitharaman has been touring the state extensively.
Jayashankar
Came for some time. So that's a lot of people, right? And it's a different strategy. But I think all of this is more at the margins, I would say. The Prime Minister, like yesterday he had a rally of, like he had 3 rallies of more than a lakh people or 2 lakh people. So that just gives a perception that, the momentum is with the BJP. And that's because otherwise his popularity is there. And
popularity is there, but I think the one thing, Rohit, which fundamentally, since your political strategy, like over a period of time, all political strategies kind of, the novelty value or the shock and awe of that gets reduced or something like that. See, this Karnataka election even last Karnataka election, there was some attempts at this narrative, but one important thing that probably I think we should also, I don't know like how much of electoral impact will cause, is kind of, the local Kannada sentiment being stoked in a very big way, right? Like starting from the the Nandini versus Amul controversy. And even before the last election, you see like a very vociferous bunch of Kannada language activists, they like some very few cases legitimately and largely imagined grievances getting fomented about like Hindi imposition. And I mean, though in a state like Karnataka, because of its innately, maybe this Bangalore OMR region it could have some resonance, but in let's say if you go to Kittur Karnataka or Kalyana Karnataka, I think like these kind of narratives don't work actually. But I think like this time they've kind of definitely trying to get in that local, the nativist kind of agenda. In fact, I think like though it's hardly distinguishable because most of these activists seem like broadly aligned to Congress, but from a political perspective, JDS has been pretty aggressive in this thing, like almost saying that voting for, I think like their appeal has been pretty, given the fact that I think they're completely shrunk or almost non-existent in Kalyana Karnataka or Kittur Karnataka, except for candidates in couple of places there. I think like they don't have even that limitation that possibly Congress has. So like they've been pretty out openly saying that this is like voting for JDS is voting for Kannadigas, voting for the Kannadiga interest and all that. This element is...
Well, that's always their line, right? Mandi Namaga, basically.
See,
Another soil
no. See, if you look at 2004-8 and all, they had aspirations to be little more pan-Karnataka party. Now, like, geographically and even socially, and even like the ownership, like it's almost like a family owned outfit, geographically shrunk to 3 districts, socially almost being identified with the one community, rightly or wrongly. So I think like they seem to have like nothing to lose kind of a strategy where they have really played it up. So unfortunately, like if they were little more like as strong as what they were even in 2013 or 2018, the issue could have actually found resonance. See, what happens is that in any cities, like even Mumbai went through that wave in 2008 to 10 when Raj Thakre's pitch found some resonance, and then obviously, the Vicer Council prevails, and people know that the city is what it is because of a certain ethos and certain composition and all that. That is why it is prosperous, like once you kind of, in your chauvinism or parochialism kind of reduce that, then that realization happens. But it has a certain resonance at a certain point of time. But unfortunately, I think JDS is not in a position to exploit it completely. I think that undercurrent has been built by a set of people. I mean, and I think this is an OMR only phenomenon. I don't think so it's there in any other part of Karnataka. It will not even work in coastal Karnataka where so many other languages are spoken, or any other part. So JDS has been using this pretty thing, and Congress also, I think, like subtly playing that card. Like Siddaramaiah, for instance, he comes from that JDS background, and this Hainda movement is its strongest in old Mysore region. Of course, there is some spillover in other parts of Karnataka, but so they also closely identified with this Kannada linguistic meets social kind of a mobilization. So if this sentiment is pretty strong, I think like Congress seem to be in a better position to benefit from it actually. And like say, for instance, I think like the only party, I don't know whether Congress has done, but JD has actually announced freebies to auto drivers, 2,000 rupees or 2,500. If your psephology is not based on cab driver, and if you go and talk with like say auto drivers, you might almost think that it's a JDS election, because I think like that is one group that they have targeted, and that is one group which is also, I think, like where homogeneous in terms of, I think there's outsiders, the quote outsiders, they are not there in that profession. So JDS has kind of taken up that issue, but it's structurally, according to me, not in that position to reap the whirlwind actually. So like
they won't emerge as the kingmaker in
yeah,
this
I
election.
think this JDS, I don't know, maybe Rohit with his better understanding, how much of JDS, like if my conventional wisdom says, I don't know how, like if JDS implodes or kind of even, doesn't do as well as it does last time, I think like the beneficiary might potentially be Congress or...
This is a very complex question, and
right?
the conventional wisdom, of course, is that the beneficiary is the Congress. But the problem with that kind of analysis essentially is that it's sort of see, the biggest like this essentially comes from the fact that BJP is non-existent in a few seats or a few districts, and hence obviously if there are only two parties, one party goes away, the second party will win. But that's not, it doesn't cover the full story if you ask me. One part of it is the BJP, of course, has grown. And the biggest reason for a JDS implosion, if at all, would be that the BJP cuts into people who would otherwise vote the JDS. Like if you look at 2018, you can see in large number of seats, especially in Mysore and Mandya, the BJP literally didn't contest.
Correct.
It's sort of...
I mean, and like odd kind of candidates fielded,
or
which
like
could be
random
mostly
people who
by
were not going to, like, who were at 2%, 3% of the vote. There's a couple of guys who even got 1%. They sort of gave a walkover to the JDS. Now that's not happening this time. Like BJP is in the... BJP is actively contesting almost all the 224 seats. A lot of the seats where, people say BJP is non-existent, Congress is this thing. These are seats where JDS, like parts of Mandya, JDS got above 60% of the vote last time. So that kind of an implosion, if it happens on the JDS, the reason Congress is behind, right? There's certain social groups that just don't vote for the Congress. So I don't think this implosion narrative is as straightforward. There are many places where it's a direct fight between BJP and JDS also. For instance, Hassan, there are seats like that. There are seats like that in Tumkur.
Even in Kalan, Karnataka, a couple of one seat.
Yeah, that's very odd.
Candidates.
Like
yeah, but it's a trend more in.
Even in Bangalore, of course, wherever JDS is relevant, is Dasarali or Yashwantpur, it's BJP versus JDS. So this implosion will benefit the and also what happened last time was the other place where Congress, where BJP is actually weak is Kolar and Chikballapur. But that's a place where, Congress literally maxed out last time. So it won 5 out of 6 in 4 out of 6 if you count an aligned independent. He's now fighting from Mahadevpura on the Congress ticket.
Correct.
It's 5 out of 6 was in Kolar. Yeah, Nagesh. He was 5 out of 6 in Kolar, and I think Chikballapur was again 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5.
So Congress sort of maxed out in these two districts. That's where BJP really hasn't. It has grown actually, but not grown fully. So this implosion narrative, it's very complex, and I think it will take too long if you.
No, actually, my sense is that if you really look at the run-up to the 2018 election, Siddaramaiah was enjoying the advantage of incumbent, and I think almost the entire local media or large sections of the local media was probably pitching for his return, because I think the media management in the run-up to the election for Congress was pretty good. I think they took care of that entire Ahinda ideological activist ecosystem. They took large extent of the media. So basically their entire run-up was almost 120, 125 for Congress, and it was premised on JDS not doing that well. And in fact, I think even Axis in its exit poll kind of got it right, because it overestimated Congress's performance in OMR actually. And I mean, that's because anyway, there is no converging sub-region where Congress, BJP and JDS are in direct fight, no? From a, if you look at...
It's increasingly happening in parts of Old Mysore actually.
Yeah.
Because, see, one thing a lot of people miss about Old Mysore when they see the Congress vote shares there is that, as we discussed, the Congress core social basis of Dalits and Muslims. And of course, Kurubas are the other big factor.
In OMR.
Especially in OMR, but large parts of Old Mysore, especially Hazan and Mandya, not Mysore. Mysore is different because it has a lot of Kurubas and even Dalits. But Mandya and Hassan actually are the two districts in the state with the least number of Muslims and Dalits.
Correct.
So any sort of JDS implosion or whatever, it's not so straightforward because the Congress's inherent social base there is very, very narrow, and it has a ceiling. So it's very.
In fact, Hazan interestingly was the first outside coastal Karnataka. If I remember right, Hazan was the first district where BJP actually emerged in the state in 1999, right? You had the Shivappa, Manju and all others coming from there, right? Actually,
they managed to do... See, in Hassan, what happened was in 1990, and I mean, I wouldn't say it was the first district, but BJP had a very good election in Hassan in 1999, even in Mysore. Primary reason was there, the Janata Dal... See, what happened in... 99 was there was a lot of anti-incumbency against the Janata Dal
J.H. Patel government, right?
Which itself split into two. One faction aligned with the BJP, the other was Deve Gowda. In Hassan and Mysore, the anti-incumbency was identified with Deve Gowda, who was not part of the BJP, who had nothing to do with the BJP in the election. So BJP could also benefit from the anti-incumbency.
So it was more a very localized issue.
It was more of a... And of course, that got frittered away over the next 7-8 years. But see, what it also shows is the potential is always there, right? And Old Mysore is a place because it doesn't have, BJP groups that are not very inclined towards the BJP in large numbers. It's very easy for the BJP to gain very fast.
Correct.
Because you can, and that's what you saw in the Lok Sabha, right? Today you can see how Pratap Simha is able to get leads in many JDS strongholds. That's because this thing is turnover is very fast. Say, Kolar is another example where, they won the Lok Sabha with a huge margin, not even it was a narrow win.
He was not even a local candidate, right?
He's a cooperator from Bangalore. From somewhere in Mahadevpura. He went there and he just won. So that's something that a lot of people miss when they say, if the JDS implodes, Congress will benefit. Of course, it can happen, but it's not so straightforward.
But what is JDS's overall strategy? I mean, I'm a little flummoxed because somehow I distinctly remember at least following two Karnataka elections, 2013 and 18, I mean with some interest. JDS always used to feature in the conversation, say even in Bangalore, 2013 they won 3 assembly seats, I think, right? Chamrajnagar, I mean, he was there with thing.
Oh yeah, correct.
Then Mahalakshmi layout and probably one Dasarali, probably third. So like they were there in like contest even in 7-8 seats in Bangalore. 18, of course, I think like they were very focused on OMR, but even in a normal conversation, somehow JDS seemed to be like missing the way even they featured prominently, and like for 2000s, all of us remember like Dev Gowda used almost like the person who used to make or break governments in Karnataka, right? Like 2004 government and then the 2008 everything.
I think what's happened with the JDS is two things, right? One is there's been a lot of family infighting. That's obviously, see, they got a lot of momentum in that Pancharatne Yatre. Kumaraswamy did get a lot of momentum, but what happened was this family infighting sort of took over their narrative. The other thing is this increasing focus on DK Shivkumar has sort of, because he's also a Vokaliga, that has sort of dulled, at least in the narrative. I don't think it has impacted politically. But it on the narrative, it has definitely hurt the JDS. But what JDS has done very smartly this time is, and this might affect in terms of numbers, is a lot of guys who were denied tickets by the BJP and the Congress, they've just taken them. Like they've randomly picked them up, and you'd never know how many.
Kumaraswamy there, and then this is one of
Yeah,
them.
there's a lot of people like this throughout.
In Kalyan, Karnataka also, right?
Even in Kittur and central Karnataka, you never know how many of them will actually end up winning, or they may go give up good fight.
Even the Bijapur,
Yeah, there's a guy in Bijapur who's gone. The guy in Bidar who's gone.
Bidar, sorry.
So you don't know how many of them might win, but that's something they've done fairly well, and it can be a surprise for them. But I mean, you don't know.
Over and above that core districts, 3 core districts, your sense is that they will potentially the Congress BJP rivals who they onboarded might pull in a surprise here and there, which could even, I think like anyway their ambition is like 30 to 35.
Yeah, I mean like because not
so-
beyond that.
All right, can I get you guys to commit to some numbers? So maybe we'll begin with you, Prasanna. What will the final seat share look like?
Congress 100, BJP 95. That is like, as things stands now. I don't know how the build up to the campaign goes in the last week, how the narrative is managed and all that stuff. So let's see. That's my wild guess.
What happens in that scenario? I mean, I'm just saying. So JDS.
See, I think
will
this time,
become
this time I have an intuition that in case there is a fractured mandate.
It'll be funny if.
No,
neither
I think this
DK
time.
nor,
This time I think JDS and BJP and JDS will form a coalition government in case of a fractured mandate. Like with a 50% chance of a fractured mandate. This time JDS won't go with Congress. And also, to some extent, it's a natural convergence. At least they don't have like major overlapping geographic competition, right? Like, and it actually almost a throwback to the Janta coalition, right? With additional thing. That is my. So in case there's a fractured mandate, I predict like there'll be a JDS BJP government with the BJP CM. My sense is that like just because of the fact that Congress is a pan Karnataka party, in the sense that they are in the race in almost all the parts of Karnataka, plus of course cyclical politics of Karnataka, at least as far as the assembly elections concerned. There is like government, I think like the last time I don't remember when the last time maybe 83, but that was not even a full-term government.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think
So
you can count
Ramakrishna
that.
Hegde won in 83, and then 85 Congress got dismissed.
Yeah.
Rajiv Gandhi dismissed him, and he was voted back to the power on kind of sympathy. And before our Subramania Swamy came and damaged Hegde beyond thing. So that was the last time, I think, right? Then 89 Congress, 94 again JDS. 99 Congress, 2004 was again a coalition, 2008 BJP, 13 Congress, 18 BJP, whatever, or 1 year of. Actually, one thing that's missing out, I don't know, like BJP was like what, 3.5 years government, is it, or almost 4 years?
4 years, I'd say. 3 years.
When did it? August,
July or
July,
August.
okay.
July or August.
So like 3
months.
years, 3 years,
15
8 months. So that natural cyclical thing happens in Karnataka, plus obviously the anti-incumbency and all that. So I think like Congress has got a decent shot just because its risks are. I mean, it can like underperform in one region and still hope to make the overall numbers. But in case of BJP, it has to max in its traditional strong regions, which is like central Karnataka, coastal, and Kittur Karnataka or Mumbai Karnataka. Okay, and ensure that it doesn't suffer massive reversal of fortunes in Kalyana Karnataka, and like make some marginal gains in Bangalore actually. So like so many things have to happen for BJP, and like Rohit just made, I think last election central Karnataka, I think they did so phenomenally well, BJP, like say Shimoga, Davangere, and Chitradurga. I think like they almost won everything there actually. Like I mean Yadurappa factor plus the kind of social base that they have. So that has to happen. Plus, they won like 30 out of 50 in Mumbai, Karnataka, where I think like this time I think they have very good candidates. If you look at seat by seat, and like wherever they were weak, they've also got reinforcements, let me put it that way. Similarly, Bangalore might also be a bit of a surprise in the sense that they might win seats that they have never won, because again they've got like say Mahalakshmi layout as a seat that they could have never won. RR Nagar is again, I think like it's a kind of a sweet spot where the MLA who defected, he has a good constituency whole, plus two wards where there is like very strong middle class support base for BJP already. So unless there is some major and undeducted things, so those kind of things can happen. But Congress has the luxury of even underperforming in one region and still being within a striking distance of majority or something like that actually. So see, my overall take without any numbers is that if it gets reduced to a candidate by candidate, seat by seat kind of a race, then it will be a fractured mandate. But if there is some kind of a groundswell, which at least non-partisan polling has not ascertained, then like, I mean, maybe Congress could have a significant hedge. So like, but as things stands now, it's I would really think that it's a seat by seat, candidate by candidate election. And even all the people who defected from Congress to or JDS to BJP, I don't think so anybody went back and all that stuff. So obviously there is a candidate factor in that election. So that is my sense.
Rohit, will we see will we see neither DK nor Siddaramaiah become the chief minister, not even Karge, and then Kumaranna sort of emerge?
I think one thing I can confidently predict is there will not be a JDS CM.
Is it?
I think that's
no. Even I said it will be even if there is a BJP JDS. I think both the parties will insist.
Both the parties will insist on their own CM.
Draw numbers.
See, I think as of now, again, it really depends on whether there's any undercurrent or something. But assuming there's a seat by seat election, I'd sort of put the BJP at around 100 and Congress at around 90, or maybe 92, 93. JDS somewhere around 25 and 2 to 3 seats for others. But that's if there's a seat by seat election. If there's no seat by seat election, depends on whether there's a anti-incumbency / a freebie wave for the Congress, they can cross majority. And if there's a sort of a national upswell for the BJP in general, which has happened in many states before, undetected, BJP can also cross a majority.
All right. Before we end this rather long, very insightful discussion, just your thoughts, final thoughts on what is the significance this is going to have on the upcoming 2024 elections. I mean, do you see this at all as some kind of a core?
I think it'll be fairly irrelevant from 2024 perspective. The two things people say. One is that apparently it will gain some funding for the Congress, but I don't think the Congress is really short of funds. If you saw the Bharat Jodo Yatra, you can be sure that the Congress has enough and more cash.
Yeah. Anyway, I think like they are always plugged into the real estate business interest of Bangalore. So I don't think so there will be something fundamentally more that they would be gaining actually from.
The other thing is, I mean, Congress governments have a tendency to, if Congress does come to power, Congress governments have a tendency to accumulate anti-incumbency very fast.
Very fast,
Like you could see it the last time with Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh. The definite, like, well, of course there was a Modi groundswell.
Even I
in
think like
2019. there
Siddaramaiah was also become quickly unpopular by 2014
itself. So that, and if that, unless something drastically changes, I don't think that will change, because one thing that they do well, they do all their freebies, etc., is the quality of day-to-day governance does drop drastically in terms of power and many other things. And that was definitely a feature even during Siddaramaiah's role and other states also. So that's the other thing, and that can help the BJP in the Lok Sabha election in Karnataka. If the BJP wins, I think one thing that will happen is, I think you will see an emptying out of both Karnataka and Congress and JDS. Like, there are a lot of people who are going to jump ship. It's going to be a structurally, like, it would be a election that changes the structure of Karnataka politics if BJP comes back to power alone or in a coalition. So that will make the Lok Sabha, I would say, almost a no contest in
correct.
Karnataka. But so yeah, I mean, so because all of this practically, I mean, I don't think the Lok Sabha it will have a serious impact.
Actually, I think like winning is like it's a tough state to govern, right? Like in the sense that, let's say Congress comes, they are sitting on a complete like Siddaramaiah has already spoken about proportional reservation, 75% quota, and like they're already sitting on demands of so many social groups, and like their politics, like he said, right, like is fundamentally oriented towards caste census and all that stuff, right? Like which might make, like, say, some activists and some social groups happy, but from an overall perspective, right, it becomes like a very they can quickly turn unpopular. And I don't know, like again, the cost of all these promises. One, I think the worst thing that can happen is that, like, they might just say that we are going to implement these promises because Lok Sabha election is coming. That I think is like a real danger, bankruptcy. But let's say that, like, I don't see, even if you really look at the 2018-19 cycle, like BJP didn't form the government in Karnataka, lost Telangana, then it lost MP Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh, and like by December 2018, I think Congress and the allies were already deciding on the next cabinet and who will be the ministers and who will be allying with them and all that stuff, actually, and what was the verdict. But my only thing that I would be looking out for is that in HP, which is like almost a 60% upper caste state, BJP lost largely. I think that, I mean, of course, it's such a narrow loss by 1% or 2%. What is the vote share difference? 1%, I think.
Almost.
1% difference. So that old pension scheme played a decisive role. Here, if this welfare is, like he says, there's a potential where the guarantees have resonated huge and people just want to vote. Like, see, I mean, you can't blame them. Like, they'll be okay. People want to get stuff if somebody promises, right? Like, and if that happens, then I think that might set a template for the 2024 elections. And then I think, like, either Prime Minister has to recalibrate the strategy. Like, if you can't beat them, join them by doing that, which I would be very surprised if he does it. But, or, you kind of counter it by the need to do something which is like more dramatic and more unifying and, which is emotionally resonating with the masses, like some kind of a move. He'll be, see, like, I think, like, after demo kind of moves, right, he's generally not been prone to any major, either economic or social. Even like CAA was, I think, like, I mean, I don't know, like, maybe it was bad in terms of the protest management, but from a law, it was, according to me, not very dramatic. Like, say, after demo, he's been, like, largely measured in terms of there was no need to. He's not done anything like very dramatic, which kind of polarizes people.
Nothing quite compares to that also.
Demonetization, right? So like my only concern is that then probably he might be tempted to look at some kind of a massive counter, and it could be even economic. Like if you can't see, like for instance, Rohit, you might remember that when Bihar was lost in 15, right?
Yeah.
15 or 14?
15.
15. Then like the role, like the pitch, if you look at Modi days, initial days, it all started with say NJAC
Yeah.
bill, and then it started with
Land
defanging the land acquisition bill, and in fact there was also a very aggressive agenda of PSU and all. And after that, Delhi was lost and then Bihar was lost. Before the UP election, I think like by that time he had quickly recalibrated to a slightly I would say like UP make welfare is kind of that LPG and all that. So obviously political parties also would have to win elections, and they have to kind of constantly recalibrate the strategy. Though like as you said, like BJP also does welfare and freebies, but typically they kind of have a certain Lakshman Rekha for it, which they will not promise, say something like Nyay or say like what this 5 guarantees that Congress gives. So I don't know like whether the verdict might tempt BJP also to kind of do something very dramatic on that side. So that might be the significant thing. And see, and also 10 years, right? Almost 10 years. So like you got to do something, I mean, see, there is a natural attrition of popularity of any leader during a life cycle, right? Like where it happens, and then and today with social media, right, like people are expecting like governance, everything, something dramatic needs to be done, and all that stuff, right? Actually, so I hope that it might potentially trigger a, freebie
Race to the bottom.
Race to the bottom. I mean, I don't know. Like, I trust Prime Minister has better judgment, but of course he's also a politician who would want to win elections and all that stuff. You can't take a holier than thou attitude that I'll not give this guarantees and all that stuff. So I think like that will be closely watched in this election. If that freebie guarantee kind of is created a huge groundswell and makes a impact on the election, then we should watch out.
All right. On that very interesting note, we come to the end of this, analysis on the Karnataka elections. People have been asking us for almost months now to do an analysis of, these elections. And, I'm very glad that we held off until now. Right. This is, one of the most entertaining, fascinating conversations I've had on the podcast on politics, especially. So thank you so much, Rohit, as always, for joining us on the podcast. Thank you, Prasanna, for coming in as well. So this was a wonderful discussion. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it. And for more content like this, please follow and subscribe to us. We're at Bharat Varta on all social media platforms. So I'll see you again on another episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.